Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the Black Alumni Trailblazers panel discussion. My name is Tiara Bird, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Lifelong Learning Programs here at VCU. My colleague, Larry Powell, who is the Director of the Alumni Affinity Programs, is here as well. So we will be here, and we are super excited that you all are joining us today. I think this discussion is going to be amazing. We have an amazing panelist, we have an amazing moderator, and I want to make sure that we go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. All right, so this discussion will be recorded and sent to all attendees. So if you're joining late or something came up, you will be able to view this later. It will be sent to all attendees as well as posted on the VCU Alumni YouTube page. Also, please make sure that attendees mute yourselves when you are listening to the discussion. We want to make sure that everyone can hear correctly, and you all will be able to ask questions at the end. We're going to make sure that we be respectful of everyone's time today. And without further ado, I want to make sure that I introduce our amazing moderator, Ms. Nina Sims. She is the past president of the VCU African American Alumni Council and a past member of VCU's Alumni Board of Governors. She's also dedicated time to the VCU African American Alumni Mentoring Circle as a mentor and advisory board member. Nina holds a graduate certificate in digital marketing from University of Virginia. Since 2007, Nina has served as Director of Marketing at the Community College Workforce Alliance, where she coordinates marketing efforts, including advertising, public relations, publication development, website management, digital campaigns, as well as community outreach. Prior to her work at CCWA, she was Director of Marketing at the Virginia Department of Business Assistance. Nina began her career of service to Commonwealth nearly 25 years ago as a Senior Marketing Associate with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. In addition to her job responsibilities, Nina is currently the President of Midlothian Chapter of Jack and Jill of America, Incorporated. She has also served on the volunteer boards of several organizations, including Communities in Schools, Richmond, the Junior League of Richmond as well, the United Way of Greater Richmond and Petersburg, and the Richmond chapter of Public Relations Society of America. Nina and her husband, Lamar Sims, recently celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. They have 3 children, and she is an active sports mom who also loves basketball, VCU basketball. I'm sorry, go Rams. So without further ado, Nina, you can take it away.
Thank you, Tiara, and thank you everyone for being here today. I've had close connections over the years to experience some amazing contributions throughout the VCU community. And a big thank you to my friends at the Alumni Office and the VCU AAAC for inviting me to moderate today. It's an opportunity to share space with these amazing leaders and all of you. I recently found a definition of trailblazer that I thought might be appropriate as we begin today. It defines trailblazer as someone who's willing to take risk and to go in a path that isn't already there and leaving a path for others, which I think all of these individuals have done, and you'll get to know soon. An hour would never be enough to capture all that these 3 individuals have done and contributed to the VCU community. And we're excited about this discussion, and we will begin with individual questions and then some general questions for whoever wants to respond. We're going to begin today with Mr. Jim Elam. Jim, Mr. Elam, you were elected as the first Black student government president at VCU. Share with us what led you to decide to run for that position and what you faced during the election process in the 1970s.
Thank you. Back in 1969, I came to VCU as one of the first of we felt to be just a handful of Black students. They were literally thousands of students on campus, and there were only a few of us. However, I guess during a discussion that we had with, we were discussing articles in the Commonwealth Times, which is a local school newspaper, and in that newspaper they were describing the political affairs. They were describing the upcoming student government elections, and as we sat and discussed those elections, we noticed, particularly, I noticed that there were very few students who participated in those elections, and so I concluded that we could have an impact if I ran for student government president. On my way to run for the presidency, I was walking down Franklin Street when Jay Mangum, who was another candidate for president, asked me, but what office was I, what office was I running for? And he said, you running for treasurer? I said, no. And he said, you're certainly going to be vice president? No. And when I told him president, he said, oh, you don't stand a chance. That was the impetus for me to go out and really make an impact. And so the campaign began at that point, but before that, when I first came to VCU on the campus, there was only a few, like I said, there were only a few of us there. This is in 1969, the new administration, new president, a new university. And I was there only by my mentor and long time always friend, Dr. Edward H. Peoples. Dr. Peoples, got me into the university. And I remember going up on the campus. He told me I was in New York working, and he said, come on back to Richmond, Jim. And so I came on back to Richmond, walked up on the campus, having not been admitted yet, but was confronted by one of the students up there, Charles McLeod, who really should be on this panel, because he was a trailblazer in terms of African American, activities, and he recruited me to attend a meeting with an interview that they were having with the vice president of student affairs, Dr. Dick Wilson. And so I was in on the interview for the presidency for the vice president, not even been admitted to the university, and so I had some inkling as to the operation of the university. But and so
Mr. Elam, that is some amazing support. Was there anyone else on the slate of African American on the slate when you ran for president? I'm just curious.
No, there was no one else on the slate. No other African Americans on the slate. In fact, we felt there was such a small group of us that there was never a chance for you to be elected. But in campaigning, and we went from dorm to dorm, and then from department to department, and particularly my support came from the arts department. The art students were very supportive because they were not being represented. The business department was being represented and had all of the power on the campus, and so those handful of folk control the university. And so when we launched that campaign, we went forth to involve more students, and was actually able to do that. We face such discrimination from some of the faculty, and in particular, we formed alliances with the staff. There were not that many staff at VCU. In particular, there was not that many faculty members. One of the persons that made it possible for many of us to attend the university at that time was Miss Ellen Pearson, the director of financial aid, who made sure that we had some funds available to continue our education. This was a marvelous time. The struggles that we encountered were just unsurmountable in terms of having to tackle, or not tackle, but literally, but the problems that the VCU police brought to us in terms of discriminating against us. And when I later found out after leaving the university that they had arrested, not arrested, but that the chief of police had been caught with guns in his possession, we were devastated. But all of that during that time, we made great strides and great changes. The university, the students at the university, and in my very first few months of operation as president, the student newspaper, the Commonwealth Times, published the masthead came out, Elam in all black, Elam victory. And I literally had to, on the day of the election, go on the campus, and I got death threats, telephone death threats, and I literally go on the campus and restrain or restrict students from attacking the Commonwealth Times office, which is on the third floor of the admin building at the point. But we just faced just so many challenges. But the major challenge that the major effort that I think that we contributed was increasing the number of Black faculty and staff. We noticed that there were very few, and in looking over some of the material for this event, I ran across an old brochure that we had printed up, saving Vincent Wright's job as assistant dean of students, and we particularly challenged the administration at every level. I do give it to our first president, Dr. Warren Brandt, who included, well, I mean, maybe not by design, but he included the student government president be a part of the university's governing body. And so I had opportunity to impact not only the VCU campus, but the MCV campus in terms of them forming policies. I remember particularly going to the MCV campus and telling them and explaining that when I was at the MCV, that a physical therapist had abused me, and that woman was summarily dismissed, demoted, or whatever. And that was years before that. Well, then not that many. It was in the 63 when I was in the or 62 when I was in the hospital. But the impact that we had on the university, what I think was tremendous. That small group of us, and the impetus really came through not student government as much as through the Black Student Association, Students for an African Philosophy, of which was the spearhead for a lot of the activities that went on at the university. And we pushed them, and at every level and every opportunity to include more Black faculty and include more Black staff. We found particularly, and I challenged the university and publicly, they gave me an article in the Commonwealth Times that only lasted about 3 or 4 months, and it was titled "On the Dark Side," and I particularly pointed out the issues that we were fighting the university on, and one of them was there was a known policy of the university that they were not going to hire anybody in the electricians and the trades, and they would always hire the grounds people and the janitors. They were all of them were always Black. So we challenged them on that, and I think we forced some change through structuring with the personnel director of the university. I would probably be better answering questions that persons might have rather than rambling on, because I have a tendency to go on forever.
Well, you know what? You've earned your place to do that, and we have a lot of respect for that. Thank you for your perseverance. And I think what spoke to me the most in that is that you were a student doing this, not in your late in your 20s or anything. That you were a student doing this, and so that should be applauded. We will have time for more questions, Mr. Elam. Thank you for that.
Okay.
We're going to move on to our second president of the African American Alumni Council, Ms. Gail Robinson. You were involved in the formation of the AAAC. Describe the AAAC and how it came into existence and any obstacles that you faced. Ms. Robinson, you're on mute.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today. I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
I think Mr. Elam sort of spoke to the environment. I was a graduate student, and VCU had just been created, I think, in 1968 with the merger of MCV and RPI. That was about 50 years ago, and Virginia was a very different climate, very different culture, at that time, I guess I could say that the VCU identity was really a pervasive issue. As time passed, African Americans didn't feel a part of VCU as students or alumni. So in the 80s, when the VCU Alumni Office reached out to some African Americans alumni to discuss ways to improve the connection, I think there was suspicion, particularly in light of the fact that retention and graduation for Black undergraduate students was dismal. They were being admitted, more were being admitted, but few were graduating. So discussions began around that issue and some others among some African-American alumni about an African-American Alumni Council. The interest, as I said, it was twofold. First, to provide nourishment for alumni, but also to increase the retention rate among undergraduate Black students. But I would suggest to you that had we not had the support of 3 African-American faculty in Dr. Grace Harris, Murray DePillis, and Alvin Scheck-Snyder, I don't know whether we would have been as successful. And of course, there are buildings now named after Grace Harris and Murray DePillis, and I was at that dedication for the building for Dr. DePillis, and Dr. Scheck-Snyder was very instrumental in getting that to happen. But it just took a lot of hard work, a lot of persistence, and with the help of those few faculty members, because as Mr. Elam said, this was a different environment. There wasn't a lot of Black faculty members, but these faculty members stepped out, made it clear, they pressed, they supported, they risked so that we could form this organization. And that's sort of how it happened. But it wasn't a welcoming environment. There was some pushback. But I think that when you know what you want, what you're made of, what you deserve, then I think that you do what you need to do to get it. But I do want to say, and I want to echo what Mr. Elam said. Sometimes it was you didn't feel welcomed, but I don't know if that mattered. I mean, I really don't. I don't know if we were trying to feel welcomed. I think we were trying to be a part of the university, a legitimate and rightful part of the university.
There you go.
I think that that's what we were able to do in the final analysis.
It's a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And we'll move now to Dr. Charles Smith. The Black Awakening Choir was originally founded in 1970 by Faye Smith. Please share with us the challenges you faced as you were getting involved and to reactivate the group and to establish a foundation for the choir that we're familiar with today.
First, thank you for having me and good afternoon to everyone. I appreciate the work of Mr. Elam and Ms. Robinson. When I arrived at VCU in 1972, there were a few of us on campus living in Rhodes Hall and Johnson Hall and what we used to call it's no longer there, the Chocolate House. So we didn't have a lot to do. We had some things. We kind of hung out in Rhodes Hall and Johnson Hall. And I found out later that there was a choir at the university that had some kind of way gone away. So I started moving around because I was singing with the Petersburg Youth Choir, and we were traveling and singing, but I didn't have a car. So getting back to Petersburg was a challenge. So I started talking to some of my friends on campus. I said, look, maybe we need to bring this choir back. I found one guy who used to sing with the original choir. His name was Bill Mickelson. And so Bill, and then we found another guy, Ronald Allison, we used to call him Shimmy. So we just started gathering some of our friends together, and we didn't know where we were going to rehearse or anything. We found a room in Johnson Hall that had an old piano. And so at that time, we had Judy Braithwaite, who had come to the university along with her husband, Dr. Ron Braithwaite. And so we asked her if we could use the room to rehearse. And so we kind of started off with a small group of folk, and we didn't have any money. So after we got started, we had to go to the student budget committee or whatever they called it and petition them to give us some dollars to support. And of course, we went through this whole thing about where they couldn't do for religious organizations and all those kinds of things. But we were a group of young Black folk. We wanted to sing. A lot of us had sang when we were home. And we thought this would be a good way to get the students involved in something else at the university. And this would also, just give them another way to, serve the Lord and whatever they wanted to do by participating in the choir. So we ran into some uphill battles, but at that time we had, it was a Dean Langston, who was over in the Dean of Students, and then Dr. Napoleon Peoples, who were one of the few Blacks who were on campus, who were in the counseling center. So we got them as our advisors, and they started helping us work through the process to get some money from the university to kind of support the choir. So initially we were just doing it to kind of, because we wanted to sing and participate in singing in churches. And then because I had some time where I'd met Shirley Caesar and James Cleveland and all those folks, I said, well, look, we can turn this into something that's really good for the institution. And something Mr. Elam spoke to, and also Ms. Roberts, the retention rate for Black students wasn't good on campus. It was simply not good. And so one of the things that I talked about with the choir, and I became the director, I was only 19 years old, but I thought it was a way we could have some impact on the student body, but also provide them with an opportunity to have some pride in what was going on at the university. So we work with Dr. Dr. Julie Pelham, we work with Dr. Braithwaite, we work with Dr. Napoleon Peoples and Dr. Tim Langston, that's what the dean's name. And so we pulled things together and we started off singing locally. And then as members joined the choir, we would work with each member, and we ended up singing at their different churches around the state. And so we just, at that time, I knew harmony and all those things. So I was putting the music together, and I found a great piano player, from the music department. The first one was Ron Hanson, and Ron was out of Philadelphia and he could play anything. Well, Ron eventually left, went back to Philly, and we found another young brother, a guy named James Mosley. And we taught him how to do the gospel side, and we started moving forward. But the choir really took off when we found this young man named Elmo Woodbury. Elmo Woodbury was out of Norfolk, Virginia, but he was a member of the church called Yahweh Yahashua Messiah. And I had to convince his father, who was a bishop, that we were all still serving Lord Jesus Christ, because he felt, well, his son shouldn't be playing gospel. But we were able to bring Elmo on board, and we just found folk who could play congas and drums and all those things. And the choir really took off. And one of the things that we convinced the budget committee of, that by us singing at these different Black churches around the state and outside the state, that it gave VCU a different face and showed folk, that Black students at Virginia Commonwealth University, that we were doing some things. And we convinced the president, because I had a meeting with him one day, and I said, look, we are actually attracting more folk by traveling to these churches all across the state than most of the things at VCU. And as Dr. Elam said, Mr. Elam said, we got a call one day from, forgot her name, she was over the MCV campus. She said, well, look, I need you guys to sing at least one semester here, do a concert down on this campus, because at that time, the two campuses weren't like they are now, they weren't merged. Right. So we start singing there, and then we found this church that was right beside Rhodes Hall. It was the United Methodist Church, and Reverend Cox was there at the time. It was a predominant white church. So he called me one day. He said, I'd like to meet with you. He said, I want to help the choir at VCU. I want to help Black Awakening. So he offered us his activity room for practice. He said, you guys can practice here anytime you need to, at no cost or anything. And what they did also, they allowed us to do a concert each semester where they raised money for the choir. So what actually happened with the choir just became, and we had a lot of students who wanted to join. And of course, at that time, we had to do auditions and all kinds of things, because we wanted to make sure that our sound was solid. So the choir became not just a choir, but it became a place because we had rules and regulations that talked about your grades, talked about you attending class and all those kinds of things, because we wanted to make sure if you were part of the choir that you were also moving persistent to graduation, because we wanted to have some impact on, on the students who were in the choir in terms of the university. We got an opportunity late back in 1976, 77 to do a recording. And Dr. Murray DePillis, who I had met, and I think Ms. Robinson just spoke about him, he was the dean of the School of Arts at that time. Mm-hmm. So I met with him and Mr. and Dr. Peoples and said, look, I need your help, because we were concerned. We had raised a lot of money to do a recording, the first album that Black Awakening did. And so, but what we wanted to make sure that once we did, we could use the name VCU Black Awakening Choir, and that the school would not tax the revenue that was generated from the sale of the album. So Dr. DePillis, he had a lot of juice. We said Dr. DePillis had the juice. So he was able to get the president and the powers that be to let us record the album and using the VCU name, but not required that we had to give them any residuals, financial residuals from the sale of the album. Because what we wanted to do, because we had musicians, and these musicians, they were playing, and I required them to rehearse a lot, so they couldn't hold jobs. So we were able to put some money in their pockets every month for playing for the choir. And the choir really took off, and we were traveling all over the place, everywhere. I mean, we did concerts in Philly, New York, Baltimore, down south, we were just everywhere. And but we were carrying the name of Virginia Commonwealth University. And a lot of students who were in the choir, because when students came to the university, they wanted to join the choir. And a lot of them came because they had seen Black Awakening Choir singing and got a chance to talk to some of the students. And there was some uphill battles. We caught some heat because some of the white fraternities and the organizations found out that the school was giving this Black Awakening Choir money. So they raised a lot of complaints and we had to meet with the president and everybody, but they said, no, we're gonna stand with this. So, but the choir used to catch a lot of heat because even the guy who was basketball coach, I know Mr. Elam, you may remember a guy named Chuck Noll. He went to the president. He said, well, why are you guys giving this student choir all this money? And so there were some complaints, but we kind of weathered that storm with the help again of, because at that time, Dr. Grace, Dr. Stanley Baker, Dr. Virgis Thornton, a lot of faculty were all kind of involved, helping us and moving us through. So it was some tough times, but one of the things that, today, I think through Black Awakening Choir, I could say we had about a 90% graduation rate in that group. And a lot of those folk are now bishops and reverends and mayors of cities and city council members, and they've done well. And I think it was because that we had an opportunity, they had an opportunity to participate, but they also held leadership positions. So, and I'm just proud that the choir is still there and still going strong. I think that through that organization, we just helped a lot of students move from where they had come from to a better situation. And I hear from folk all the time, and they just happy to have been a part of the choir. And I'm just thankful that the Lord was able to bless me and provide me with some support. And we connected with Anesta Highsmith, and Faith would show up periodically. And it was just a good time in a difficult situation, because even in 72, you guys know we had just come out of a big situation with 68 all across the country, and Malcolm and we had some Muslim brothers on campus, and there was that whole big thing going on, who actually shot Malcolm. But it was a good time, some sleepless nights, but I think all in all, I thank the Lord for the opportunity to be at VCU, but also the opportunity to have the opportunity to work with Black Awakening Choir for my time.
Dr. Smith, amazing history. I mean, I was blown away by all of that, because you really spoke to just the recruitment and retention efforts of a choir. Larry, I know your office has been in that business for a long time, but nothing to that effect. So that is remarkable work, again, as teenagers. So just so overwhelming to hear that. Zarin Moses was the founder of Black Men in Medicine. So Zarin, welcome, and let us know a little bit more about what motivated you to form the group and the process you had to undergo.
Yeah, so thank you guys for having me. I started the process, really was kind of twofold. Black Men in Medicine started originally as a campaign out of the advising office at VCU. So everyone that declares for a pre-med, pre-anything really track in sciences gets a professional health advisor. And that year, I think it was 2014, 15, the department had kind of had a little bit of extra money to set aside and really didn't have a direction for it, and kind of gave some of the advisors leeway to start up a project. And that same year, the American Medical Association had just released a report saying that going back to, I believe, since about 1973, up until that point, the rates at which Black males were matriculating into medical school, meaning that they were starting medical school in that fall, had actually declined since then. And then around that time, there had been a distinct push to get that number actually in the opposite direction, and it had gone down. And so there was a major push kind of in that setting to see if there was any way to get more minority males to be able to apply and be matriculates for medical school. And so what we did, that advisor, who ended up being my pre-med advisor, he essentially got a couple of the other advisors together, and they just sent a mass email chain to anybody that was listed as a Black student at VCU that was on a pre-med track, and kind of got all of us together, whoever would respond back. And for that year, we mainly kind of used each other as resources to study groups and things of that nature. But kind of at the end of the year, there was such a need and request for the rest of the members to kind of have help for a lot of some of the other things with just getting to medical school, as far as what classes to take, getting through doing shadowing of physicians and getting opportunities to be in hospitals and things of that nature, visit medical schools and see these programs. And so we really formed what ended up being Black Men in Medicine from there, and took it over and turned it into a student-led organization out of that idea, essentially wanting to both take the original mission, but make it also a brotherhood that we could use and kind of lean on each other to take care of all the steps to get to medical school. And so I took over as president, and we founded the actual student-led organization. And from there, we kind of did more things like that. We kind of would take trips to different medical schools and try to make sure that along each way we were having seminars that were led by different Black leaders in the Richmond area, whether there were physicians themselves or doctors of other medical sciences. And from there, we really wanted to take everything that we had been doing and kind of make an environment where we would have a mixer once or twice a year, where really we would get all of the students together that were in the program and kind of match them up essentially with a room full of, we tried, I think at our best, of about 25 to 30 different physicians that were in the area, and tried to network them with research opportunities and shadowing opportunities. Because as I would come to find out, once I became into medical school myself, that was probably one of the most underappreciated at the time goals that we didn't realize that we were achieving, is just the amount that you aren't able to see once you are on that side, and the amount that you really aren't, especially from a minority standpoint, and just being able to see that side of things. We really don't have an idea of how it works a lot of the times. And if anything that I've seen in my time that has caused minority individuals to struggle in medical school, is that just that exact concept of it being so foreign and so different of a concept of education, and the amount and vastness of it, that a lot of the times, if there is a reason why someone will drop out, if they're a minority, usually it has a lot to do with that, the not being able to fit in, or not feeling like you've seen enough or done enough around everything that you fit into what you're trying to become. And so that was really kind of the main goals in setting out and establishing the organization. And it's still running at VCU now. It's been, I think we're in probably about 5th or 6th year now. I was also obviously the founding president, but I think out of the original members of the organization, there were 3 of us that year that ended up going into medical school. And from there, I believe it went from 5 to 9. And I think total now we've gotten close to 20 Black males into medical schools across the country. One of which I'm proud, my vice president that actually started with me is 2 years under me at VCU Medical School. So it's really kind of that mission that we wanted to bring about, because it's a place that, especially with where we are with the pandemic and where we are with the times that we're living in right now, it's so important to have some sort of representation for that person that's on the other side, for when you're a patient. To have someone that looks like you, or that even thinks in the degree that you do. That's really kind of the mission that this really serves. It's very difficult in a lot of situations, especially before we get to the pinnacle where we're able to help a lot of these people in these situations. It ends up being where you're just not in time enough to be able to help. You don't know enough of the information. You're not close enough to everything to be able to help some of these people. And you look at the people that are, some of the people that are teaching you, and they may not be able to communicate with some of these minority patients as best as you know you probably could in that situation. And so there obviously is a grave need for an increase, a continuing hopeful increase in the amount of representation of minorities as physicians.
Zarin, thank you so much. And I think we've learned over the last 2 years just how important that representation means, and your work has been tremendous. Thank you for that. I will let any of you chime in. I've got just a couple of questions open to any of you. Do you believe that your experiences at VCU have affected your or impacted your career, personal life in any way that you want to describe to the group that you haven't already mentioned?
Of course. I mean, since I decided, I'm originally from New Jersey, but since I decided to stay in Richmond and Virginia and pursue my graduate education, I mean, this is an educational institution. And so I love learning, and I found it exhilarating to be in the environment. Now, I'm retired now, but many of the tools and the skills that I learned at VCU served me very well professionally. And then there's the camaraderie, there's the colleagues, it's what you retain for the rest of your life. So I think that everything that's been said, I'm so impressed by the other panelists, particularly the folks who were undergraduate students, because I was a graduate student and I had, started my family. So I was at a different stage in my life. And I think it makes a big difference when you're a young undergraduate versus a graduate student. But, and I think that all that has been done, forming the African American Alumni Council particularly to keep the alumni engaged, I think that all that has helped change some attitudes and things about African Americans, about VCU. But, and I think VCU has benefited well also. But I don't think there's any question that it has served me well, both personally and professionally. And I'm delighted to have been a part of that effort at that time. But I also think that it's what you bring to the table. I mean, and it's what you understand that you are supposed to do and that you have to do in terms of life in general. I mean, I think, you're required to be engaged, to serve, to invest. And I think that's who we are as a people. And I think that's the strength and courage we bring.
I think those are important words, because one thing that it seems to be a trend here in these conversations would be the faculty support.
Yes.
They didn't stop, they reached out, and none of this would have happened without them. Mr. Elam or Dr. Smith?
Well, for me, like Ms. Robinson, I think ended up. I worked at George Mason for 9 years. So for me, the skills and things that I learned by being the director of Austin just prepared me. So whenever I was in a situation with people of a different color, I was confident. I didn't get, afraid from having to. And one of the things that being a director helped me with the fact, because the students saw me as a person that they could come to with any of the problems. In fact, I used to have parents calling me and saying, well, so-and-so is not doing well and they in class, and I need you to do this or do that. And so it was just be put in that role as a young undergrad college student, but it has respect is something that's very important. And even though we were dealing with some racist stuff at VCU at the time, because I dealt with some issues in my undergrad and I also did a master's. So, but it helped you not to get caught in that, to actually move beyond your circumstances and remember what your goals and objectives were, and that you always got to treat people as you want to be treated. So for me, it served me well in terms of my leadership of skills.
Wonderful. Mr. Elam?
I think it brings to mind at VCU, we take great pride in ushering in changing administrations. We convinced the administration to create a whole new African American department for African American studies. We brought them in. We increased faculty in every department, because in some departments there were no faculty.
Mm-hmm.
We we bought. I remember particularly we bought when I took over student government. Student government had a budget over $100,000, and that those monies were divvied out between the different organizations on campus or different activities on campus. All of the concert and dance committee stuff. So we able to bring to the campus people like Les McCann, Parliament Funkadelic. I mean, we able to increase the level of presence of Black folk. In my bid to be reelected, we had great Dr. What was it? The comedian Gregory. He spoke at the mosque, and he even supported me. But the opposition had produced such had grown to a swell, and so they came out and grow in droves to get me unelected the next time around. But that being said, my tenure at the university really aided and assisted me. When I left, I became the manager, the credit union, the Gilpin Federal Credit Union, one of the first, I think only about 6 or 7 community credit unions in the country, low income credit union. And after that, after that stint, the government, of course, shut us down. They shut all of the credit unions down, claiming fraud and all of that kind of thing. And so after that, I went to work for Neighborhood Legal Aid Society as an organizer. And I think my skills in confronting authorities, aided me and assisted me into developing and stopping the highway from going through the Churchill community, which is going to divide and split the community up. There was supposed to be a road going from Staples Mill on down through Churchill, the extension of 64. I don't know if you remember that, but that we were able to stop that. And then in the interest of, after stopping that, we created an organization on Churchill called the Churchill Area Revitalization Team. And the Churchill Area Revitalization Team teamed up with a developer. We actually developed the Churchill House and the Fairmont House complexes, had plans and all of that to build those two entities. Couldn't get the funding, and so one of our members said he knew somebody that could get the funding because the Republicans were in office at that point, and so they were able to get the funding to the Wind Development Corporation, which we ended up getting money from them to start another organization, the Churchill Neighborhood Inc., in which I directed for a number of years to develop, going into developing housing.
Lots of good projects started at VCU, huh?
Yeah, so I think that, my education served me well.
Absolutely. And Zarin, are you practicing now or still in med school?
I'm still in medical school. I'll graduate in December. We're kind of in the time right now where I all but free work. Definitely seeing a lot of patients every day, but yeah, I have a few more months to go.
And what is your specialty?
I am trying to be a general PCP. I just want to kind of give back and take care of just general specialty patients.
Important work, important work. Tiara, do you want to take over with any questions that might be in the chat?
Sure. If anyone has any questions for any of our panelists, you guys can put them in the chat. We want to be respectful of everyone's time today. And before we close out, we want to send a survey to get some feedback for today. But now would be a great time if you did have a question for any of the panelists to put that in the chat. Thank you.
And while we're waiting on those, I just wanted to thank these great panelists. I really want the chance to connect with all of you again, to be able to dig a little deeper into this. Trailblazing, we have to be reminded, doesn't end. So there's still some great opportunities for students, for faculty, for alumni to write their own stories in their everyday efforts. And of course, a lot of work still to be done in the VCU community. I'll hand it back to Tiara with the questions, but I want to thank you all for being here today. It's been my pleasure. And our friends from the alumni office, thank you for inviting me to moderate.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sims. So we do have a question in the chat. Let me go back to find it. It's from Lamont Sledge. And it says, what advice would the panelists give to future VCU Black Trailblazers? Even though we have accomplished a lot there's still a lot to accomplish. And anyone can kind of jump in.
I think it goes back to what we've all said and demonstrated. You have an obligation to be purposeful and knowledgeable about the political bureaucracies in which you operate, because that's how things get done. So you need to understand your environment, know your environment, understand your purpose, understand what you're about, understand what you bring to the situation. And then, you get to work.
I'll just ditto what Ms. Robinson, just add one thing. It's about being servant leader.
Yes.
It's not about you. It's
Yes.
about those you serve and those you're called to serve.
Yes. Same thing. I mean, we all have God-given talents, and it's about purposeful living. So I agree.
I chime in and agree with both of you, and I think that that it's important that you committed to your beliefs and get things done.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really add is just to don't wait on opportunities, seek opportunities out. That's really kind of the one piece that I'd say I've seen people that really don't make it or become trailblazers in that sense of the word is because they really kind of wait on opportunities and instead of seeking them out themselves.
If I could just add here, just because I've been a part of the VCU African American Alumni Council's mentoring circle, I just want to put a plug in right here because in addition to this faculty and having the support of the university, it's so nice to have such a strong circle of alumni that reach back and support the students today. And there's a call right now out for more mentors. So look for that opportunity and make sure that you reach out.
All right, let me scroll really quickly. I know we have a couple more minutes. Let's see here. Suzanne, you asked, how can you all in VCU past faculty and students, as well as current, get many to attend the VCU upcoming reunion in April and continue to honor Dr. DePillars and the naming of the VCU Arts Building? Was this a question for the panelists or was it a question for the alumni team? Suzanne. And let's see. So let's see, there was a question for Mr. Moses. What can the healthcare community do to engage more people of color in medicine?
It's a good question. I think one thing, kind of harping back to the idea of it being an unknown realm for us when we start our education and training, I think the biggest thing that the community could do is provide resources and opportunities to experience those things early. I think if it were something that were made known throughout kids in the inner cities here, throughout the opera, the university as well, as far as creating a network of people that were willing to take on some of these people in the community and kind of take them under their wing. And then that was a major goal of Black Men in Medicine and everything that that they did there, or that we did there. And then I think that another thing that the healthcare community really could do is to just continue to have more representation. I think that's the biggest thing, because the more that we can have people that are out on the front lines and being seen with that, kind of off of that, another one is making sure that we are seen. That's another one I'm not sure why is very difficult for us, but just making sure that people are seen and heard in the community would go a long way.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me scroll to see if we had any more questions.
And let me make one comment. I saw
Sure.
one person saying that many students were not aware of the naming of the building for Dr. DePillars, and I don't know why that's the case. It was a wonderful ceremony, done very well, as it should have been. He was just an incredible person, and I knew him. I knew his art, and I also knew his leadership, not only for the art department, but for all minority students at VCU. And so maybe that's something that the Alumni Association needs to make sure that the word gets out. But it's a beautiful building, and you can't miss it. You can't miss it. I love it.
I totally agree with that. Dr. Pillars was the strongest faculty member supporter in my era. He even donated his art to us to sell so we could make money to have the operation grow. I mean, he counseled us continuously, and he was just there for all of us.
Yes, it was, and that's my point.
Yeah, I can echo that too. In fact, Dr. Pillars was one of my mentors. In fact, I got an opportunity to work with him at Chicago State University before he decided to retire. So he just was a wonderful person, and he just supported everything I was doing and the choir was doing through the time that we were there.
Thank you. And we did have someone requesting contact information. I'm assuming they just want to follow up and maybe have some questions. And, panelists, if you don't mind sharing your contact information, whether it be email or whatever you feel comfortable sharing, or if you want the VCU alumni team to kind of share that with panelists, I just want to make sure you're comfortable with sharing that information.
Hey, Kiara, can I address Susan's comment about
go for it.
about our events?
Absolutely.
At the alumni office, we do whatever we can to spread the word, either through email blasts, social media posts, sometimes old school postcard mailings. But, the most effective way to spread the word about our activities is through word of mouth, and also through individuals utilizing their own personal networks to spread the information about our event. We have a limitation on having updated contact information for everybody, but if each individual would just utilize their own personal networks to help spread the word about our events, our reach can double and triple at minimum just by that simple act. So I would suggest people consider that.
Awesome, thank you. And also, Larry did post a survey in the chat, which we can repost as well. We want to get feedback so that, we can create programming in the future that you all love. We want to get your feedback on how this event was, and we appreciate all of your honest feedback because we actually do read through it. So if you guys can complete the survey, that would be amazing. And as well as if anyone has a question for the panelists, I'll get permission to share their email contact information. You can reach out to us. It is a little bit after 1, so I definitely appreciate the moderator, all our panelists, for making this event amazing. This was transformational. A lot of information I didn't know. So thank you all for dedicating your time to us today, and we appreciate it.